Get off the sidewalk, old man. The teenager shoved him hard. 92-year-old Walter Reeves stumbled into the street. A car swerved. Horns screamed. And those kids, they laughed. No one helped, except for Clara. 2 days later, those same boys were called into a school assembly. No one told them why. And when the 10 old men walked in, everything changed. Walter Reeves had lived through 2 wars, 3 recessions, and the slow fading of a neighborhood that once stood proud. He didn't wear medals, didn't talk about the good old days, didn't even have family left to remember them with. Each morning, Walter put on his old gray coat, frayed at the cuffs, and walked 2 blocks to the public library. He sat by the window, read the same paper cover to cover, and borrowed nothing. Then around 4 p.m., he walked home. Same route, same pace. No one ever stopped him. No one ever asked his name. Inside his apartment, the walls were bare, except for one shelf. A small wooden box rested there, no lock, no label. Inside, 2 black and white photographs, a Purple Heart, and a folded American flag stained slightly at one corner. Beneath the box, a letter, handwritten, yellowed with age. You saved me. If I don't make it tell my folks, I wasn't scared. And tell them about you. Pete Danny Michaels, 1945. Walter had read that letter maybe 1,000 times. It wasn't grief he felt when he read it, it was duty. The kind that doesn't end when the war does. The kind that tells you to keep standing tall even when no one salutes anymore. He wasn't bitter. Not even when the world moved on without him. He just didn't expect much from people anymore. But that day on the sidewalk, something shifted. It wasn't just the push. It was the laughter. The ease with which they dismissed him as if his life had no weight. As if the decades he carried were a joke. And the fact that one of them recorded it like it was content, that stung more than the bruise on his arm. Walter didn't want revenge. He wasn't a hero in a movie. He was a man, a tired one. But that night, as he placed the letter back in the box, he paused. And for the first time in years, he made a call. Not to the police, not to the news, to a friend. Someone he hadn't spoken to in nearly a decade. Someone who once told him, "When the world forgets, we remind it." The next morning, 10 calls were made. 10 chairs arranged in a school auditorium. And Walter Reeves, the man they pushed aside, decided to show up. Clara Bissett couldn't shake the image. Walter stumbling off the curb. The teens laughing. The people passing by as if it never happened. She kept hearing his words. They don't know what they just laughed at. Clara taught history at Fairview High. She believed in context, in understanding where people came from. But that moment, it felt like a hole in the timeline, like someone had torn a page out of everything she'd tried to teach. The next day, she returned to the library. Walter was there, same coat, same seat by the window. She didn't ask how he was. She just sat down and said, "They need to hear from you." Walter didn't answer right away. He looked past her eyes, distant, like he was replaying a much older memory. Then he nodded. "I know someone who can help." That someone was Harold King, retired Navy corpsman, now founder of a small nonprofit called Echo Bridge, a veterans storytelling collective. Clara made the call. Harold picked up on the first ring. She explained what happened, what she saw, what she feared was being lost. Harold didn't ask for headlines. He didn't ask for justice. "We don't lecture," he said. "We remember out loud." That's usually enough. Within 24 hours, he had responses from 9 fellow veterans. Different branches, different wars. Same mission. They didn't want press, no cameras, just a room and a chance. Clara went to the school administration with the idea. The vice principal hesitated. "You want to bring in a group of vets to—" Talk to the boys who shoved an old man into traffic? Clara nodded, not to punish them, just to let them see what they nearly erased. The VP sighed. No announcements, no parents, no drama. You get 1 hour. Clara agreed, and so on a quiet Friday morning with no one watching, 5 boys were pulled from class, led to the auditorium and told to sit. No idea why. No idea what was coming. And outside the door, 10 veterans waited not to confront them, but to remind them. What happened next? No one was prepared for. They thought it was detention. 5 boys pulled from different classes with vague instructions. No explanation. Just report to the auditorium. Leave your phones. There was no roll call. No adult waiting at the door. Just silence. Jordan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. Terrell cracked his knuckles, bored. Aiden whispered something about wasting time. The room was cold, dim. The school hadn't turned on the lights properly, just the old fluorescents humming overhead. Rows of wooden folding chairs faced an empty space at the front. No screen, no projector, no podium. It looked like someone forgot to set up. Then, at exactly 9:01 a.m., the side doors opened, and 10 men walked in. They weren't what the boys expected. No uniforms, no flags, no dramatic music. Just old men. Their clothes were simple pressed shirts, worn jackets, one in a VFW baseball cap. One walked with a cane, another with a slight limp. Some of them looked like they should be in nursing homes, not leading assemblies. But they moved with quiet purpose. Not rushed. Not slow. Like they knew exactly where they were and why. They didn't sit behind a table. They didn't clear their throats or wait for applause. They simply found chairs in the same circle as the boys. Level, human, present. Jordan glanced around, confused. There was no teacher, no counselor, just these 10 strangers. Aiden leaned toward Tyrell. Who are these guys? No answer. One of the old men reached into his coat and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. He didn't look up. He just said softly, "My name is Tom. I want to tell you a story. It's not about war. It's about someone I left behind." And with that, the room changed. There was no need for microphones, no need for authority. Because when someone who's seen the worst of the world sits across from you with hands that have buried brothers and eyes that have seen too much, you listen, even if you don't want to. Even if you don't know why yet. Tom's voice was steady like someone reading from memory, not paper. Okinawa, 1945. My buddy Ray didn't make it past the 3rd hill. He'd just learned his fiancée was pregnant. He died with the photo in his hand. No one interrupted. Not even a cough. The boys looked around, unsure if they were supposed to react. They didn't. Tom folded the paper again, set it in his lap, and stared ahead. Next came Anthony, an older black man in suspenders with hands like stone. Ardennes. The snow didn't stop falling for 6 days. I carried a man named Carlos, 4 miles through slush and shelling. He died 2 days later. He didn't cry. He just whispered, "Tell my mama I wasn't alone." That's the only thing I ever promised and kept. He didn't mention medals. He didn't mention glory. Only names. Only goodbyes. Then came stories from Vietnam, Fallujah, Korea. No blood. No body counts. Just, he was the best chess player I ever met. She wrote poems in the tent at night. We promised to open a diner when we got home. I did. Still waiting on him to show. Each voice added something unspoken to the room, a kind of quiet weight that pressed down without crushing. Aiden stopped shifting. Terrell leaned forward. Even Jordan, arms crossed earlier, had his hands flat on his knees, now jaw clenched. None of the men looked at the boys while speaking. They didn't need to. The stories weren't pointed. They were offered. Then, eventually, they reached Walter. He didn't stand right away. He waited until every other voice had gone still. Then slowly he pushed himself to his feet. No paper, no cane, just Walter. Yesterday I was knocked down. A group of boys, maybe some of you, brushed past me hard. I ended up in the street. But that's not why I came here. He smiled faintly, not bitter, almost amused. I've been knocked down before. In France, in a trench, in a hospital bed with more tubes than hope. I don't scare easy. But what caught me off guard was the laughter. Not cruel, just careless. He looked up, eyes calm open. You see, I don't wear medals. I don't tell war stories on street corners. I just walk, think, try to remember the people I couldn't bring home. Men like Danny who never got to grow old, and who might have given anything for a chance to be shoved aside at 92 because it would mean he made it. His voice softened further. I'm not here to lecture you, just to ask one question. He looked each boy in the eye gently, deliberately. If one day you're lucky enough to grow old, how would you want to be seen? As someone to laugh at, or someone worth listening to, even when their voice is slow? That's all. That's my story. He sat down. No applause, no judgment, just quiet, and something inside the room that hadn't been there before. At first it was a joke. Jordan slouched deeper in his chair, arms crossed like a wall. Tyrell smirked with practiced indifference. Aiden rolled his eyes, mouthing sarcastic commentary only his friends could see. They weren't scared. They weren't sorry. They were teenagers cornered in a room with old men talking about battles from dusty history books. How bad could it be? Then Tom spoke about Okinawa, and the smirks faded just a bit. Then Anthony spoke about Ardennes, and the eye rolls stopped. By the time the sixth man shared a name, just a name, no story, just the name of a friend who never came back, the boys were sitting upright. They didn't notice they were listening. Not at first. But it was there in the way their hands stilled, in the way their eyes stopped darting toward the clock. Jordan's fingers twitched on his knee. Not fidgeting now, just restless, like something inside him was waking up. Tyrell leaned forward a fraction, arms no longer crossed. Aiden did something small, but unmistakable. He reached into his pocket. Quietly. Secretly. He pulled out his phone, not to scroll, not to text, but to look at a photo. A black and white picture he kept hidden in his gallery. His grandfather dressed in a military uniform, standing stiff and proud in front of a faded flag. Aiden had only met him once when he was 4. The man had served in Korea. He stared at the photo for a long moment, long enough for everything else in the room to fall away. Then he locked his phone and slid it back into his pocket. Eyes forward now, jaw tight. No one said anything. But something had shifted. And the veterans, they didn't gloat. They didn't even glance at the change. They just kept telling stories. One after another, gentle, devastating, unforgettable. Because they knew truth doesn't shout. It lingers. The last story ended like the first one began, quietly. No applause, no closing remarks, just silence. The kind that doesn't ask for permission. The kind that presses on your chest and doesn't let go. The veterans stood, some slowly, others with practiced ease. A few adjusted their coats. One man tipped his hat politely. They didn't look for approval. They simply nodded and walked out the same way they came, in soft steps, heads high, shoulders back. The boys remained seated. No one told them to stay. They just didn't feel like standing yet. Aiden stared down at his shoes. Tyrell rubbed the back of his neck. Jordan kept his eyes on the floor, the lines of the woods suddenly fascinating. The air in the auditorium had changed, not in temperature, in weight. When the last veteran left the room, didn't exhale. It just paused, like it wasn't ready to go back to normal. Eventually, the bell rang. The boys stood. Not all at once, not with swagger. They left in silence. But not all of them. Jordan lingered. He walked slowly to the side exit, then down the hall, following the veterans at a distance. Walter was the last one adjusting his coat as he stepped into the lobby. Jordan approached, hesitant. Walter turned, slightly sensing him. Sir Jordan said, voice barely more than a whisper. Walter looked at him, not with recognition, not with judgment, but with curiosity. My grandfather had an old rifle, Jordan continued. He served in Vietnam. I never really asked about it. But my dad kept the gun. I don't know how to clean it right. A beat passed. Would you? Maybe show me. This Saturday. Walter studied him for a moment, then smiled gently. Bring the rifle. And bring questions. I'll bring coffee. Jordan nodded. No handshake, no speech. Just two men from two very different wars meeting on common ground. One ready to listen. The other, ready to teach. It started small. Quiet, even. A week after the assembly, Clara stood in front of her class and said, We're launching something new. It's called Legacy Talks. No groans, no rolling eyes. Just a room full of students who had only days ago witnessed the power of a story well told. The assignment was simple. Meet with a local elder, preferably a veteran. Ask questions. Listen deeply. Then write a profile about their life. Not their battles. Their humanity. Jordan signed up first, then Tyrell, then Aiden, who insisted on doing a video piece instead of just text. Clara didn't object. Soon the list of volunteers grew longer than the list of available interviewees. The students were going into nursing homes, churches, barbershops, anywhere. Someone with gray hair might sit long enough to be remembered. And the stories they found, incredible. A former pilot who once flew reconnaissance over Vietnam with a Bible in his lap. A radio operator from the Gulf War who now ran a small landscaping business. A medic from Korea who still carried a picture of his best friend in his wallet, folded but never torn. Tyrell wrote about a Marine who'd returned from Iraq and built prosthetics for children. Aiden's short documentary featured 6 veterans and played in the school auditorium during lunchtime. No one left early. Every Thursday, the legacy wall outside the history room gained new pages. Typed-up bios, scanned photos, quotes written in shaky cursive. Students who used to speedwalk past the hallway began to slow down. Read. Take it in. Then came the idea for a photo exhibition. It was Jordan's. What if we could see them, he said. Put faces to the stories. Clara helped secure funding. The PTA got involved. The community center offered space, but the students voted to keep it in the school. It started here, they said. It belongs here. The exhibition was called Those Who Came Home. Opening night was standing room only. Rows of portraits lined the gymnasium walls, each with a short caption written by a student. In the center, a small stage. No decorations, just a microphone. At 6:45 p.m., the room went silent as Clara stepped forward. Tonight is about remembrance, about restoring what time and neglect have almost taken from us, the right to be seen before being forgotten. Then she stepped aside, and Jordan walked up. Slightly nervous, slightly taller than a few months before. I used to think history was boring. I used to think old people just complained. A soft ripple of laughter. Then stillness again. But then I met a man who carried silence like a badge, who walked slower than me but carried more than I ever had, who didn't need to speak loudly because the weight of his truth did it for him. He paused, swallowed. Mr. Walter Reeves, would you join me on stage? The audience turned. Walter stood slowly near the back row. He wore a dark blazer, pressed slacks, and for the first time in over 50 years, his medals. Not many, but enough. Enough to remind everyone in the room that a quiet life can be a decorated one. He walked to the stage with measured steps, refusing help. When he stood beside Jordan, the boy stepped back slightly and said, "He didn't come here to be honored. But we came here to say, we see you now." The applause that followed wasn't thunderous. It was something better. It was sustained. Like the people in the room wanted to make up for all the years they hadn't clapped before. Walter didn't say much, just nodded, smiled. And when he looked out over the crowd, his eyes didn't see strangers. He saw students, listeners, witnesses, and maybe a few future storytellers. A week after the photo exhibition, Walter received a letter. It was hand-delivered, no stamp, no name on the envelope. Just 2 words written in ballpoint pen for Walter. Inside was a folded sheet of lined notebook paper. The handwriting was uneven but careful. "I didn't just push you. I pushed away everything I didn't understand. Thank you for standing still, so I could finally see." There was no signature, but Walter didn't need one. He knew exactly who had written it. He kept the letter folded neatly inside his coat pocket, tucked behind the photo of Danny Michaels. He read it often, never aloud. 3 weeks later, the school added something new to the hallway where the legacy wall stood. A framed plaque, plain wood, with a single sentence etched in brass, "Respect is not taught. It is shown." Beneath it hung a photo of Walter taken from the night of the exhibition, his medals just barely visible under his blazer, his smile almost imperceptible, but unmistakably proud. 3 months after that, Walter Reeves passed away in his sleep, peacefully. No struggle, no hospital. He was 93. His obituary was short, but his funeral was not. Over 200 people came, students, teachers, veterans, neighbors. Most of them had never heard his name before the assembly, but all of them remembered him now. And when the service ended, and the sun cut through the trees outside the chapel, one student whispered to another, "He didn't say much, but somehow he changed everything." Not every hero wears a uniform. Not every war is fought on a battlefield. And not every lesson comes from a book. Sometimes the most powerful truths arrive quietly from a man who walks the same sidewalk every afternoon, carrying memories no one bothers to ask about. Walter Reeves didn't change the world with speeches. He didn't demand attention. He didn't even raise his voice. He just stayed still, long enough for someone to see him. And in doing so, he reminded an entire generation what dignity looks like when no one is watching. His medals are back in a box now. His stories live in notebooks, audio files, classroom walls. But more importantly, they live in changed eyes, open ears, and 5 boys who grew up the day they chose to listen. So let me ask you something. Have you ever asked your grandparents about their past? Have you ever sat down not out of duty, but out of curiosity, and said, "Tell me a story," because maybe the man you rush past on the street carried someone through gunfire. Maybe the woman who repeats herself in the grocery line once held the line in a hospital tent under shelling. These lives don't ask to be remembered, but we should remember them anyway. Not out of guilt, but out of gratitude. So this week, ask, sit, listen. You might just find the story that shapes your own.